Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources, articles, research, and expert notes and distill it all down to the essential, the absurd, and the truly enlightening.
Today, we are strapping ourselves into the bombardier seat for a flight into what is really a bureaucratic black hole.
We're talking about Joseph Heller's 1961 novel, Catch-22.
That's absolutely right. Our mission today is to move past just the famous phrase and get into the complex, often maddening mechanism of this particular war machine.
We're trying to extract the core insights here. Absurdity, military logic, individual survival. We're drawing it all directly from the narrative to really get at the philosophy behind all the frenzy.
And the stage for all of this is the fictitious Italian island of Pianosa. It's set in World War II, but you're right, the conflicts feel completely timeless.
Well, and the source material is very clear on this. It tells you that the physical actions described couldn't possibly happen on this tiny island, and the characters are all made up.
But the truth Heller is getting at, about institutional madness, about the corruption of power, that feels, unfortunately, very, very real.
And at the center of this whole maelstrom is the bombardier, Captain John Yossarian.
His motivation is not patriotism, not glory, and it is certainly not victory. It is, I think, refreshingly and brutally simple.
Survival.
Just survival. The novel establishes this mandate right away, noting that in this conflict, the only end in sight was Yossarian's own.
Which leads to that core belief he has, that one sentence that, defines the entire book.
They're trying to kill me.
He's perpetually haunted by that certainty. And when his friend, the earnest but sort of logically flawed Clavinger, protests,
He says they're shooting at everyone.
Yossarian delivers the ultimate existential counterpoint. And what difference does that make?
That exchange, right there, that encapsulates the entire moral framework of the novel. Yossarian gets that the danger of combat is, a shared immediate threat.
Of course.
But the institutional forces, the people mandating the missions, for him, they are the true executioners.
Right. The danger from the enemy flak is an accepted risk of war. The danger from your own commanding officers, that's a betrayal.
It completely elevates his personal reality above the military's institutional reality. His fight isn't with the Axis powers, it's with the system.
Okay, so let's unpack this chaotic, self-devouring world. Let's start by looking at the specific figures who populate this absurd landscape of Pianosa, starting with those who are trying to find refuge.
If the combat zone is where death comes from the outside, then the hospital is where they try to hide from the inside.
The hospital ward, it's the novel's first great sanctuary.
It is. It represents those brief moments when the system's gears just grind to a halt. Yossarian is in bed initially for, an alleged case of grip.
A simple case, yeah. But what's really interesting is how Heller explores the creative ways people use the system's own weaknesses to find some personal peace.
And the ultimate example of that has to be the character Dunbar.
Oh, Dunbar. His method of survival isn't just ingenious, it's like a philosophical masterpiece.
He's working hard at increasing his lifespan by cultivating the one thing the military absolutely hates.
Intense, debilitating boredom.
Exactly. Dunbar spends his time lying motionless on his back, eyes fixed to the ceiling, actively seeking out and embracing monotony. He's trying to manipulate the subjective experience of time.
And the theory is, time only flies when you're having fun or doing something meaningful.
So if you can manage to make your experience sufficiently dull, time stretches, becomes infinite in a way, thereby extending your effective lifespan. It's an intellectual withdrawal from the war.
It's pure, passive, intellectual resistance. He's just embracing total lethargy. But into this perfectly calibrated sanctuary of boredom comes a man so overwhelmingly obnoxious.
So relentlessly patriotic.
That he fundamentally breaks the system's loophole. We are talking about the Texan.
The Texan is such a profound piece of satire. The sources describe him as genuinely good-natured, generous, likable. He has this perpetually rumple-headed smile.
He's the ideal citizen. He's the kind of guy the war is supposedly being fought to protect.
And yet, in less than 3 days, the entire hospital ward finds him absolutely unbearable.
And it's his politics that makes him unbearable, delivered with this earnest, relentless passion. His core belief was that people of means, the decent folk,
Right, the ones who own property or had good jobs.
they should receive vastly more votes than the drifters, whores, criminals, degenerates, atheists, and indecent folk.
And this is Heller just exposing the hypocrisy that underlies so much of the rhetoric of war. The man who embodies ideal American patriotism is a man who fundamentally believes in, disenfranchisement and class division.
His presence is so annoying, so psychologically exhausting that he drives literally everyone, Yossarian, Dunbar, everyone, straight back to the dangers of the combat zone.
In less than 10 days.
Yeah.
They preferred anti-aircraft fire to his company?
It's the ultimate irony. The system's ideal soldier is the one who causes the system's refuge to fail. Only the soldier in white remain.
Because, chillingly, he had no choice.
And that brings us to maybe the most pure, disturbing, and abstract symbol of bureaucratic control in the whole book.
The soldier in white.
This figure is just haunting. Detail him for us.
He is encased entirely from head to toe in plaster and gauze. He's essentially anonymous. And his 4 useless limbs are hoisted up perpendicularly by these taut wires and long lead weights.
He's like a grotesque monument to injury.
He is. He exists entirely through medical apparatus. The only visible feature is this ragged, round, jet black hole over his mouth. No sign of lip or tongue. He is pure patient data, stripped of all humanity.
And his death, or maybe termination is the better word,
Right.
is the chilling punchline to this whole idea of administrative control.
He just lay there, alive in a physical sense, until Nurse Kramer read his thermometer and just announced that he was dead.
This is so crucial. Heller is making a precise, horrifying statement here.
The narrative implies that if she had never read the thermometer, she'd never recorded the data, he might still be lying there, alive in this administrative limbo.
So his physical existence was secondary to his status in the medical record.
His life was ended not by biology, but by the completion of a required administrative observation. It's the ultimate statement on the power of the record over human reality.
The data dictates destiny. So if we move beyond the hospital, we find other characters whose specific forms of defiance or pathology really define the squadron's reality.
Often against this backdrop of systemic racism and personal vendetta.
Let's start with Chief Whitehalfote, who channels his considerable resentment into a very specific, self-diagnosed goal.
Chief Whitehalfote, he's described as a handsome, swarthy, half-blooded Creek from Oklahoma. And his chosen vengeance against the white man isn't, immediate or violent.
No, it's a slow, dramatic, and somewhat ridiculous suicide.
He wants to die of pneumonia.
His disillusionment is so deep, and it's rooted in these repeated betrayals by the government. His tribe constantly had oil wells sunk right under their tents.
And his cousins were denied re-entry into the U.S. just because they were categorized as red.
So his desire to die by pneumonia is this perverse attempt to reassert control over his own fate. It's a final act of defiance.
And he channeled this dark humor into tormenting his squadron mates, most notably Captain Flume.
Which creates what our sources are calling the Flume paradox.
Ah, yes. In a drunken moment, Chief Whitehalfote threatened to slit Captain Flume's throat open from ear to ear one night while he was sound asleep.
And a Flume, who had been this buoyant extrovert, a carefree, optimistic guy, he immediately transforms.
He becomes a brooding introvert, obsessively terrified of falling asleep. He's trying to force himself to stay conscious or just dreaming that he was awake.
And the irony is, Chief Whitehalfote was almost fond of this new, haunted Captain Flume. He proudly viewed him as his own psychological creation.
It just shows how, in this environment, the psychological warfare inflicted by your own comrades is sometimes more effective than enemy flak. You can evade flak. You can't evade a sleepless night of manufactured terror.
Contrast that manufactured terror with the inherent, deep-seated anxiety of Hungry Joe,
whose pathology is defined entirely by the moving mission count. He suffers from these relentless, screaming nocturnal terrors.
Snakes, rats, and spiders, right?
Right. And here's where that Catch-22-esque logic takes hold of his personal life. His nightmares only happened when he finished his missions.
So when Colonel Cathcart raised the mission count, Hungry Joe actually felt relieved.
Because he was not scheduled to fly. The uncertainty of completion is worse than the certainty of danger. The war becomes his structural stability in a really perverse way.
So finishing his duties meant facing the terrifying uncertainty of what? Going home?
Yeah.
Dealing with real life?
Which was evidently more terrifying than the psychological safety of the ongoing mandatory flying schedule. He's trapped between the fear of death and the fear of peace.
So if those guys are all defined by their complex relationship with fear, we have to look at the flip side, the ones who lack it entirely.
Which makes them almost as dangerous as the bureaucracy they serve.
Like McWatt.
McWatt, for instance. He is described with his chilling simplicity as the craziest combat man. Precisely because he was perfectly sane and still did not mind the war. His untroubled integration into this lethal system makes him an outlier, a threat, and a source of irritation for everyone else.
And his behavior really highlights this passive aggression. He's continually whistling these bouncy show tunes, snapping cards while dealing blackjack.
Seemingly oblivious to the suffering around him, causing Hungry Joe to disintegrate into quaking despair. McWatt's happiness and sanity are a form of cruelty.
But McWatt's indifference, it really pales in comparison to the immorality of Arfi,
Arfi, the dedicated fraternity man, the lover of cheerleading and class reunions.
who did not have brains enough to be afraid.
And this simple lack of comprehension, this failure of imagination, it frees him from the natural instinct for self-preservation.
And this lack of fear enables his profound moral detachment, which we see so clearly in that scene in Rome. Yossarian desires a specific girl Arfi had spent time with.
But Arfi, with his, fraternity boy sense of misplaced gallantry, decides she's a sweet kid and then refuses to take advantage of her.
And in this moment of bizarre, casual control, he compels her to throw her prized salmon-colored cameo ring out the car window.
The moment is just shocking in its moral vacuum. Arcee's lack of fear means that he can't compute danger or consequence for himself or for others.
When the girl throws the ring away, Hungry Joe, who's already on the verge of a breakdown, just screams hysterically. He sees the senselessness of the act.
Arcee is safe because he doesn't understand the peril, and that safety allows him to casually inflict this emotional damage.
It creates this striking contrast that runs through the whole book. Yossarian is highly functional because he is terrified and therefore moral.
And Arcee's dysfunctional and dangerous because he is brainless and fearless, which enables him to be utterly amoral.
This is Heller's point, isn't it? The system protects the simple-minded and persecutes the thoughtful.
Which brings us directly to the engine that drives this entire narrative, the military bureaucracy itself, and the rule designed to keep the thinking man trapped.
Okay, let's unpack this. The infamous, the eponymous Catch-22. We use the phrase so casually today, but the mechanics in the novel are so tightly wound, they create perfect psychological torture.
Dr. Nika explains the rule very clearly. The catch states that a person is crazy if they willingly continue flying combat missions.
Because they're placing themselves in extreme, unnecessary danger. Makes sense.
Therefore, if a person asks to be grounded, that request demonstrates rational concern for self-preservation.
Meaning they're sane.
And since only crazy men can be grounded, and they've just proven they're sane, they must keep flying.
It is the ultimate self-sealing piece of circular logic. No matter which door you try to exit, the system just routes you right back into the danger.
But Yossarian presses Dr. Nico on it. He asks, "Why won't you just ground me? You know I'm afraid."
And that's when we discover the real engine of the Catch-22.
Universal self-interest. Danica reveals that refusing to ground Yossarian is what protects the doctor from being shipped to the Pacific Theater.
Which she considers an even worse and more remote and more terrifying fate than Pianosa.
So the Catch-22 isn't just some abstract rule. It's a tool used by everyone, up and down the chain, for their own immediate personal survival, no matter the cost to others.
The moment you try to use the rule to help someone, you become complicit in maintaining the insanity for your own benefit. And the hopelessness of ever escaping this logical trap is magnified exponentially by the concept of mission creep.
This is the ultimate existential threat because it eliminates the one thing that sustains men in combat, the hope of an end date.
And it's all driven by Colonel Cathcart, whose ambition vastly outweighs his capacity for leadership. He's obsessed with becoming a general.
And more specifically, getting his picture in the Saturday Evening Post.
He believes the quickest way to get famous is to set a high, impressive number of required missions. So Yossarian was initially flying, 51 missions?
51.
Yeah.
But Cathcart arbitrarily raised the count, first to 55, then 60, and eventually a staggering 80 missions.
The psychological impact of that is just devastating. The goalpost doesn't just move, it sprints away from you.
And the sources highlight the sheer cruelty of it. Replacement crews arriving fresh from the States only had to fly 45 missions.
But the veterans, who had already endured far more, had their requirement pushed higher and higher.
It just confirms Yossarian's initial suspicion. They're trying to kill me, not the Germans, his own side.
This desperation leads Yossarian and his shattered co-pilot, Dobbs, to actually consider murdering Cathcart.
Dobbs is described as a wreck of a pilot who knew he was the worst in the world. For him, assassination is the only way out.
They plan the murder in grim, desperate detail, but Yossarian pulls back at the last minute.
In a moment of quiet, desperate morality, he concludes that Cathcart, even with all his monstrous ambition,
Has a right to live, too, I guess.
even in the deepest pit of his terror, Yossarian retains that core shred of human morality that Dobbs and the other men have had to sacrifice to keep flying. It's a moment of profound personal resistance.
He's rejecting the violence that the system seems to demand.
And this systemic demand for senseless compliance is never better illustrated than by Lieutenant Scheisskopf. His entire existence revolves around the absurd goals of military ceremony.
Scheisskopf is unforgettable. He's this ambitious, humorless ROTC graduate whose singular maniacal focus was not on-air combat training.
No, it was on winning the worthless Sunday parades. He viewed them as titanic struggles for the unattainable.
He was driven mad by the red and yellow pennants awarded to the best marching squadrons, and his initial efforts were a disaster.
Forcing him into increasingly bizarre methods, manipulating melted chocolate soldiers, then plastic cowboys, just looking for the perfect formation. His desperation was palpable.
His great breakthrough came from an idea suggested by Clavinger to let the cadets elect their own officers.
Which accidentally helped him win the yellow pennant and then the coveted red flag 2 weeks in a row. But Scheisskopf's true bureaucratic genius manifested in his final glorious triumph.
The no-hands rule.
This is a classic Heller anecdote. Scheisskopf discovered an obscure regulation stating that marchers' hands should swing no more than 3 inches from the thigh.
He enforced this with elaborate, secretive preparation, and when his squadron marched past the reviewing stand, their hands barely moved.
And the result? He won permanent possession of the red pennant. And, crucially, he ended the Sunday parades altogether, arguing that good red pennants were now too hard to come by to waste on such rituals.
His announcement to the reviewing officer, "Look, Colonel, no hands."
He became First Lieutenant Scheisskopf on the spot and started his rapid ascent through the ranks. Heller is showing us that the path to success in this machine is not bravery or tactical acumen.
It's a maniacal focus on enforcing and exploiting arbitrary, meaningless regulations. Form always trumps function.
And if Scheisskopf illustrates the absurdity of military process, then the Clavinger trial that immediately follows illustrates the complete breakdown of logic within that process.
Clavinger's trial is a masterpiece of deliberate, unanswerable absurdity. It's designed purely for the degradation of the accused.
He was charged with this exhaustive, contradictory list of non-crimes. Breaking ranks while in formation, felonious assault, indiscriminate behavior, mopery, high treason, provoking, being a smart guy, listening to classical music, and so on.
The charges were completely irrelevant. The punishment was the point.
And Scheisskopf, who was the judge, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney, ran the interrogation like a clockwork torture device. The questions were circular, impossible to answer logically.
Like when he demanded, "When didn't you say we couldn't punish you?"
And Clavinger, being the logical, earnest student, he tries to respond with reason. He says, "I always didn't say you couldn't punish me, sir."
Which is immediately dismissed as a barefaced lie by the board. They refuse to acknowledge any logical framework outside of their own desire to punish.
The moment where the colonel defines justice for Clavinger is truly chilling. It just strips away any pretense of American ideals.
Clavinger asks what justice is, and the colonel defines it as, "That's what Karl Marx is. I'll tell you what justice is. Justice is a knee in the gut." Egg-roading.
Clavinger, who's basically still a boy, is sentenced to 57 punishment tours. But what truly stuns him is the brutal, uncloaked, inexorable hatred directed at him by the 3 adult board members.
They spoke his language, they wore his uniform, yet he realized they hated him more profoundly than any external enemy.
Their duty was to find the accused guilty, and that made their hatred righteous and patriotic.
That is the military bureaucracy in its purest, most malevolent form. It's organized, system-directed hatred turned inward. They are fighting the enemy within.
The thinking, questioning man. Precisely. Heller makes it so clear. The real enemy is always the institution itself, the ones who command you, not the ones who shoot at you.
This leads us naturally into our next section. How do individuals fight back? What is the desperate art of evasion, this fight for autonomy within a system designed for annihilation?
And we have to start with the administrative phenomenon that is Major.
Major is the ultimate victim of bureaucratic destiny. His promotion to major and then to squadron commander was purely accidental.
Courtesy of an IBM machine that had apparently decided to inject some dark humor into the process.
And the consequences for him socially were immediate and catastrophic. The promotion instantly led to this morose and inscrutable animosity from the men who had almost become his friends.
He was forced into total isolation just by the rank itself.
So his coping mechanisms are a study in evasion. He adopts these genuinely absurd, reclusive tactics to avoid his men.
Entering and exiting his trailer via the window to avoid the orderly, dashing along the railroad ditch to reach the sanctuary of the forest. He became a successfully effective recluse, hiding in plain sight among over 200 people.
But his greatest act of bureaucratic defiance was his signing subversion.
He was bored sick by the endless, meaningless documents he had to sign, many of which just advised him to disregard prior communications.
So he started experimenting. He began signing his name as Washington Irving, or Irving Washington.
And later switched to John Milton because it was shorter and could be reversed. He was essentially testing the limits of the system's attention span.
And the test proved successful. The best part of this story is that none of the documents signed with those famous literary aliases ever came back.
Which freed him from the endless, self-replicating bureaucracy of the paper trail. He even started signing sarcastic phrases like, "John Milton is a sadist," or "Have you seen Milton, John?"
It's a wonderful illustration of the novel's central truth. In this world, bureaucratic reality is based solely on the signature on the page, not the identity of the person signing it.
His forgeries were actively more effective than actually complying and signing his own name.
But this administrative evasion is immediately complicated by the two CID men who demonstrate the system's innate paranoia and redundancy.
Indeed. The first CID man, who is paranoid and sickly, confides in Major that he is the only legitimate CID man here to crack the Washington Irving case.
Then a second CID man, brisk and high-strung, arrives and also confides that he's the only legitimate CID man, and he warns Major about the first one.
The system has created two independent, contradictory internal security forces designed to hunt each other and everyone else.
This is how Major learns his most important lesson. Manipulation and deception are rewarded. He realizes that people who did lie were, on the whole, more resourceful and ambitious and successful than people who did not lie.
He embraces the lesson. He lies about the first CID man to the second, which results in the second man breaking his nose in a slit trench and being sent away. Lying is the key to survival.
And this manipulation of reality culminates in Major Danby's shocking realization about official reports.
Danby reveals the ultimate bureaucratic trump card. The brass Colonel Cathcart and Colonel Corn can prepare multiple, entirely contradictory official reports to cover any potential incident.
For instance, they had one report claiming Yossarian was stabbed by a heroic Nazi assassin,
And another claiming he was stabbed by an innocent girl in the course of extensive black market operations. Danby reveals they can simply choose whichever official narrative suits them for any given occasion.
So truth is not only negotiable, it is fungible and disposable. Only the narrative chosen by authority matters.
That is deeply chilling. It proves that even if Yossarian survived the war, the state could instantly rewrite his history to suit their immediate political needs.
And speaking of rewriting reality through profit, we have to now turn to the character who defined entrepreneurial absurdity and amoral capitalism, Milo Minderbinder.
Milo's black market operations are not small-time hustles. They are a sprawling, globe-spanning corporate empire operating under the banner of M&M Enterprises.
His influence is so pervasive, it fundamentally compromises safety and military efficacy.
The famous, horrifying example occurs on the second mission to Avignon. Orr's crew discovered their Mae West life jackets failed to inflate.
And why? Because Milo, in a moment of prioritizing profit over personnel, had replaced the essential text 202 cylinders
Needed for inflation.
with mimeographed notes.
And those notes, which were utterly useless for buoyancy, read, "What's good for M&M Enterprises is good for the country."
His justification for endangering his comrades' lives was wrapped in this patriotic-sounding corporate slogan.
And what did he use the text Akasakua for? To make strawberry and crushed pineapple ice cream sodas in the officers' mess?
That contrast is the perfect satire of wartime profiteering. The essential element of survival is traded for trivial luxury. And it gets worse. He isn't just selling supplies.
He's bombing his own men. That's the peak of his commercial logic. Milo gets a contract to bomb his own squadron at the end of the war, justifying it as a sound business investment.
He has no loyalty except to the ledger. So when Cathcart and Corn try to offer Yossarian the deal to go home, Milo initially expresses this nominal solidarity.
He says, "I owe a lot to Yossarian."
But the moment Cathcart and Corn appeal to his self-interest and logic that Yossarian shouldn't receive special treatment, Milo immediately capitulates.
He adopts the system's logic. He is no better than the other men, agreeing, what's fair is fair. His moral compass only spins toward profit.
And this sense of forced transactional loyalty extends down to lesser characters like Captain Black, who is so bitter about Major's accidental promotion.
Captain Black's reaction was to launch the Glorious Loyalty Oath Crusade. This was a mandatory requirement forcing all officers and enlisted men to sign 3 loyalty oaths.
Just to receive basic, necessary equipment like maps, flak suits, and parachutes.
You couldn't fly without them, but you couldn't get them without affirming your loyalty multiple times. It's a superb example of the system creating artificial scarcity and administrative roadblocks just to enforce compliance.
And if loyalty needs to be coerced through paperwork to get a flak suit, it isn't loyalty, it's just bureaucracy.
However, this entire crusade was immediately, almost magically, smashed by the enigmatic Major de Coverley upon his return from Rome, which shows there are levels of eccentric yet potent authority that even Milo and Black couldn't touch.
Finally, let's talk about that profound philosophical debate that takes place in Rome.
Between Nately, the naive rich boy, and the 107-year-old man in the brothel. Nately, desperate to justify the war, tries to argue for patriotism.
And the old man's logic is devastating. He just turns historical convention completely upside down. He argues that Italy is strong precisely because it loses wars.
He claims the real trick lies in losing wars, in knowing which wars can be lost.
He argues pretty convincingly that Germany loses wars and immediately prospers afterward, rebuilding stronger.
While France wins wars and is perpetually in crisis, Italy won a war in Ethiopia and immediately stumbled into serious trouble. Now that they're losing the World War, everything is taking a turn for the better.
His prediction for America is stark. He claims America will inevitably be destroyed because all great countries are Rome, Greece, Persia, Spain.
He asks Nately if America will last as long as the frog. The point is that success and size ultimately lead to collapse. The small and the losers retain flexibility and survival.
So Nately, trying to counter this sacrilegious logic with that core American ideal, shouts the classic patriotic conviction.
It's better to die on one's feet than live on one's knees.
But the old man smoothly, and crucially, corrects him. He reveals the ultimate wisdom of pragmatic survival.
It is better to live on one's feet than die on one's knees. That is the way the saying goes.
And that shift from the romantic idealism of self-sacrifice to the brutal, immediate pragmatism of survival, that is arguably the key moral lesson of the entire novel.
The old man is a self-proclaimed turncoat and unscrupulous opportunist. He was fanatically pro-German when the Germans were in Rome, and fanatically pro-American when the Americans arrived.
He reminds Nately that he is 107 years old and therefore sane. His longevity is proof of his superior philosophy.
The ultimate wisdom is knowing when to switch sides and prioritize life. If Yossarian is terrified, the old man is simply wise.
This brings us to Section V, where we move beyond the fictional world of Pianosa to look at the real-world history of the novel's reception. We're drawing heavily from Joseph Heller's 1994 preface here.
And the book's initial launch was anything but conventional. It required some aggressive, non-traditional marketing to cut through the cultural noise of 1961.
The initial publicity push was phenomenal. On November 11, 1961, just one day after publication, the New York Times,
which typically used an 8-column format,
ran this unusual advertisement that spanned 5 columns wide. That was massive real estate for a novel.
And that ad was crucial in establishing the central paradoxical concept. It featured a simple but powerful caption, "What's the catch?"
And it had that comic cartoon of a uniformed figure in full flight, glancing nervously over his shoulder at some unseen danger. It just captured the tone perfectly.
And the book's initial success was largely driven by the tireless dedication of Heller's literary agent, Candida Donadio, and his editor, Robert Gottlieb.
But despite that enthusiastic internal support, the critical reception was immediately divisive, just as the reviewer Orville Prescott had predicted. He called it a dazzling performance that will outrage nearly as many readers as it delights.
The high praise was immediate and effusive. Nelson Algren called it the best novel to come out of anywhere in years, a massive endorsement from respected author.
Maurice Dolbier, writing in the Herald Tribune, called it a wild, moving, shocking, hilarious, raging, exhilarating, giant roller coaster of a book. The enthusiasm was palpable among those who got the joke.
But the negative reviews were incredibly dismissive. They often questioned Heller's fundamental competence as a writer.
The Sunday Times review, which was very slender, complained that the novel gasps for want of craft and sensibility and was repetitious and monotonous.
And perhaps the most venomous dismissal came from the esteemed New Yorker. The review stated that Catch-22 doesn't even seem to have been written. Instead, it gives the impression of having been shouted onto paper.
Which just shows a complete failure to grasp Heller's innovative nonlinear structure and that repetitive style. It was deliberately designed to mimic the cyclical nature of bureaucratic absurdity.
Exactly. But despite the split and the lack of major prizes, it didn't immediately become a bestseller. Yet, by late summer 1962, a shift occurred.
Raymond Walters reported in the Sunday Times that it had become known as the underground book New Yorkers seemed to be talking about most.
This organic, word-of-mouth success set the stage for the true explosion. The paperback launch in September 1962.
And Dell, the paperback publishers, they were completely taken by surprise by the demand. After an initial release of 300,000 copies, a massive number for the time, they had to go back to press 5 more times in that same year alone.
That's a staggering logistical headache. Twice in October and twice in December. The demand for the paperback was unprecedented, fueled by college campuses and the growing countercultural awareness of systemic absurdity.
And the longevity of the novel is so deeply tied to the fate of its main character. The journalist Richard Starnes predicted in 1962, Yossarian will, I think, live a very long time.
And Heller himself confirmed this prediction in his 1994 preface, clearing up a lingering point of confusion, especially for people who only saw the film adaptation.
He noted that Yossarian is definitely still alive at the end of Catch-22. He's not captured and he's not dead, despite that lingering image from the motion picture of him floating in a lifeboat.
Moreover, Heller cemented Yossarian's survival by bringing him back, more than 40 years older, in the sequel, Closing Time. He is the ultimate survivor, continually forced to run from the consequences of the bureaucratic machine he rejected.
And that running is the essential action that brings us back to the conclusion of the first novel, tying up all these threads of compromise and flight.
In our final section, we look at Yossarian's last desperate attempts at escape and the moral compromises he faces in the face of impossible odds.
After his time in the hospital, he is confronted by Colonel Korn with a deal.
And Korn's deal is the ultimate Faustian bargain. It's thoroughly despicable but undeniably tempting, designed to exploit Yossarian's fear of dying.
So Yossarian would receive a promotion to major, a medal for his manufactured heroism over Ferrara, and immediate transportation home.
The price for this privileged survival: he must agree to tell the remaining men that he willingly flew 80 missions.
Serving as a false inspiration to encourage them to meet the ever-increasing requirements and promising to speak favorably of Cathcart and Korn, he would become a propaganda tool.
Yossarian initially recognizes the profound immorality of the deal. It's a scummy trick to play on the men who still have to fly and die. But in a moment of utter pragmatic exhaustion, he accepts.
He tells Korn, if they don't want to fly more missions, let them stand up and do something about it the way I did.
Right. He has embraced the selfish, pragmatic side of the Catch-22 logic, the logic of the 107-year-old man in Rome. He has chosen personal survival and privilege over moral principle.
He's sacrificing the safety of his comrades to save his own skin. He has become, just for a moment, a part of the problem.
However, his relief is instantly shattered by Major Danby, who reveals the ultimate bureaucratic trap that makes even this moral compromise completely useless.
Danby breaks the news. The multiple official reports are still active.
Yossarian thinks he's safe because one report says he was stabbed by a Nazi assassin, making him a hero and justifying the deal.
But Danby reminds him that the brass still holds the second report, the one claiming he was stabbed by an innocent girl in the course of extensive black market operations.
Which means the brass can retroactively define him as a villain or a hero, depending on their political needs, regardless of the deal he just struck. His autonomy is an illusion.
He is perpetually trapped by their authority. His supposed freedom is just another layer of administrative control.
At that moment, Yossarian understands he's been played, and the system is inescapable by negotiation.
So he runs.
His running is fueled by one final personal threat that transcends the military bureaucracy entirely: Nately's whore.
She blames Yossarian for Nately's death and relentlessly pursues him in Rome, determined to kill him.
Her motivation is complex and tragic. Yossarian marvels that she holds him responsible, but he realizes the underlying truth of systemic conflict.
Every victim was a culprit, every culprit a victim, and somebody had to stand up sometime to try to break the lousy chain of inherited habit that was imperiling them all.
She views him as the ultimate culprit because he is still alive.
She first attacks him with a bread knife in her apartment, clawing at his eyes and shouting, "Assassino!" He flees.
She continues the pursuit back on Pianosa, disguising herself as a Pianosan farmer and hiding in the bushes with a huge carving knife. She is persistent, a symbol of personal consequence that the military bureaucracy tries so desperately to ignore.
Yossarian attempts to evade her with extreme measures. At one point, he straps a parachute on her with Hungry Joe and shoves her out the escape hatch of a plane over level land far behind enemy lines.
He thought he was rid of her, that he had deployed a bureaucratic solution to a personal problem.
But the very next time he approaches his tent, she appears again, forcing him to faint.
His final act in the book, prompted by this constant, relentless dual threat of death, both administrative from the top down and personal from the bottom up, is flight.
The novel ends with Yossarian running away, not just from Pianosa, but from the entire insane moral structure it represents. This brings us full circle to that original image on the book jacket, the soldier in flight looking nervously back.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating the absurdities of your own world?
The great final question for you to mull over is this. In a world governed by Catch-22, where the system is explicitly designed to trap, compromise, and ultimately kill the individual, does Yossarian running away become the purest definition of resistance, a refusal to grant the system authority?
Or is it merely surrender to the inevitable endless chase that defines the human condition?
When the game is designed to kill you, refusal to play is the only viable strategic victory.
Yossarian opts for existence over institutional acceptance, making his flight the ultimate act of self-defined sanity.